Alright, so I'm starting off a little bit late here, but I thought I'd go ahead and make a training video. This is a Liftmaster 8500, and the limits weren't holding, so they sent me a new limit module and a new motor. And so I figured rather than doing one and taking it back apart and doing the other, I'm just doing them all at the same time. So the first thing you got to do is get the front cover off of it. There's a couple screws. There's one over here. There's a few over here, but anyway, you take the whole top cover off. Once you get that off, you got to disconnect a few wires and whatnot. I took some screws out of this so I can slide this module down and out of the way. The motor is back in here. Hardest part for me was up in here. There were the 4 screws that were holding the motor mount and a little tight area for me to get into. But anyway, I got those off. Alright, so I found, as I was taking mine apart, this piece up in here. You can try to see if I point to it up there. Came out that white piece behind the metal bracket, and that piece is what allows you to pull the string and detach it from the garage or reattach it to the garage. So it's important. So when I took this piece out, that piece fell down. And so you need to make sure that that piece is in place and it looks like this. So that way, when you pull the string, that little guy will hold it open, the release there, so that you can open your garage door manually. And then when you pull it down, it goes back up into a different spot in there and it reattaches to the garage door. So make sure when you take your motor out, which is, it's all right in this area here. Comes out with 4 screws. It comes out pretty easy, other than it's attached to that chain. Once you pull that out, this stuff all kind of just fell out of there for me. And so make sure when you're putting it back together, it looks like that. You got the white piece behind, which goes in the little hole, and then the metal piece goes in there. This piece here goes in that slot, and then this metal rod goes in the hole in the back of there. And there's a little clip that goes on that rod to keep the rod from going all the way through. And then there's also a clip that goes in the front here once I put the motor back on. So I will start back up in a minute. Okay, so now you can see what it looks like with the motor. This only took me a couple minutes to get back in here once I had everything in here correctly. So you just have to put you just need to put the bar through this hole. You kind of slide the whole entire motor assembly back into this groove. Up underneath here, if you can see, it kind of slides back in back there, and the whole motor unit will slide back in there, and then you pull the bar through this and you clip this clip right back on there. And now everything is held in place, and now I need to put the 3 screws back in. There's one that goes up here, one that goes here, and then there's 2 that go in the back there. One that goes up here and one that goes down there, I believe. Actually, I'm mistaken. The one goes here, the one goes here, and then there's 2 that go back here. One that goes here and one that goes here. Once I get those back in, then I will mount the new limit module. Alright, so here's the new limit module. It's pretty simple, so you can see there. You got the motor all back mounted. You can see the screws over there on the side and where all 4 of those go. And then this is how the limit module goes in there. You can see over here on the side, it's just got 2 screws holding it in. You basically just put that bad boy in there, plug it up, and then the cable goes down into the logic board. So that part was super simple, putting back together. Now, I had to actually end up delaying a little bit here, and I had to get an entirely new logic board as well. So thus far, I have replaced everything in here. So I'm hoping that replacing this logic board has done the job. The logic board was pretty simple to replace. 3 screws, one on each side over here, one over here. The new board, these holes were not very well bored out for the screws, so that was a little tricky getting the new screws back in. And then as far as the wiring goes, I just moved, a lot of these up here are all plug and play. This piece you had to get out with a needle nose plier to put the new one in there. And then these are all your wires to your sensors and whatnot, like I forget what that thing's called, the tension monitor, and then the other ones go down to the sensor on the ground and all of those other sensors. So this one's plug and play, but the rest of these all have to go in here, and you push these little tabs back to allow you to get the wires in. Okay, so here we are at the end. I have replaced the logic board. I have replaced the motor. I have replaced the travel limit module. And guess what? None of it fixed it. None of it. But I finally, at the very end, had one last go. I figured I'd spray some WD-40 up here because the issue I am having is that when it gets to the very top, it would jump about 2 or 3 inches, and every time it would knock it out of its travel limit. So then it would close 3 inches short of the floor, 6 inches short of the floor, 9 inches short of the floor, and it would just keep getting worse. Finally, after figuring this out myself, not from Liftmaster. Liftmaster never told me anything about this. All they told me to do was on this bar, mark a black line where the line is on these bolts, and this line in the middle here on the bar to make sure that the actual clamp there mechanism was not slipping on the whole bar there itself. Sorry, I'm using the wrong terms. But the issue was this guy right there. There's 2 of those little Allen wrench bolts on this travel limit, I guess this gear that the travel limit module itself goes onto. There's one on this side and one on the other side. Those things had come loose over the last 2 years, and when it got to a point, I guess, where maybe it had a little bit more tension on it, they were slipping, and then the travel limit module wasn't properly relaying the right limits to the logic board, and thus creating the problem. So I replaced the motor, I replaced the logic board, I replaced the travel limit module, and the only thing that needed to be done was those 2 little Allen wrench bolts. So for those of you that knew to check those beforehand, kudos to you. And for the rest of you that are having problems like me, tighten up those bolts first and see if that fixes your problem. Good luck.